Hello friends, have you ever dreamed of becoming a better version of yourself? In this video, we will familiarize you with the mysterious substance that allows you to get a perfect body from your old body. But how does this usually happen with nuances? Well, hell, I'll talk about the principle of action of the substance and its influence on the human body in a physical and psychological way. And we will also touch on the script for the film, in which there are scenes that were not included in the final editing and which shed light on many untold moments. In general, it will be interesting. First, I will briefly talk about the plot of Substance, so that we have a general idea of what is happening. This will be helpful for those who haven't seen the movie. If you watched it, all the better. Well, if you want a more detailed retelling, then I will leave a link to it in the description of this video.
Sioux Island. I wanted to fuck you.
So, aging star Elizabeth Sparkle is in the very twilight of her career. Before she was at the peak of popularity, everyone loved and adored her. She even has a star on the Walk of Fame. But the years have taken their toll. Now Elizabeth hosts a low-rated aerobic show for women of her age and spills grief on nights out at the bar. One day, Elizabeth receives a flash drive with information about Sue. There is an innovative product named Substance.
Have you ever longed to become a better version of yourself?
Elizabeth receives this drug and injects it, after which a young girl with perfect shapes crawls out of her body and Sparkle herself loses consciousness. Here I will pause and note that real fights have broken out on the internet. Is Elizabeth moving into a young copy in her mind, or is the copy acting on its own? A little later, when we discuss the principle of action of Substance, I will unravel this point in detail. Sue can stay awake for 7 days, then she must, so to speak, deactivate and give Elizabeth 7 days, so they will have to switch places. At some point, Sue decides that 7 days is not enough for her and begins to break the rules, remaining active for more than a week. At the same time, Elizabeth's body, because of this, begins to age rapidly. At some point, Sparkle turns into an old woman and decides to end the experiment. She pushes the destroyer, but not to the end, comes to her senses, and kills Elizabeth. Then she begins to disintegrate herself, and decides to inject the substance herself, but as a result, a monster is born from her body, combining the features of Elizabeth and Sue. In this form, the monster lives for a few more hours, and then falls apart and dissolves. I've described the plot quite briefly. Don't worry, now I'll start talking about the substance. Everything is very detailed. Friends, I remind you that on my Boost, YouTube videos are released a day earlier and without any censorship. And there are also many exclusive videos only for Boost. For example, I have already made 7 videos on the bloodiest comic in history, and also began to talk about a manga in which psychics drive ghosts away with their foot schnitzel. I'm waiting for you to visit me in my basement. The link in the description is what the substance is and how it is. This body-altering substance duplicates certain elements of human DNA, modifies them, and creates a perfect version of the original. All negative features, for example, hereditary sores, skin unevenness, too long nose, big ears, and so on, are excluded, leaving only the positive quality. As a consequence of the resulting clone has ideal health and physical data. He's incredibly handsome and young. The age of the copy is about 20 years. You ask why the best version of Elizabeth at all? This scenario is explained when Elizabeth in her new body looked in the mirror. She noted that her new body bears a distant familial resemblance to a distant female relative. The substance modifies the DNA, does not leave the facial features of the original. Consider them simply not ideal. The kit to create a better version of yourself includes an activator, stabilizer, switch and nutrient mixture for the original and for the clone. There is also a destroyer that can be ordered separately, but its function is extremely pro. When introduced, it kills the clone. The activator can only be used once and only by the person who wants to transform. 2. The use of the original can lead to complications, and if the activator uses a copy, then the consequences will be the most sad, but we'll talk about that later. The stabilizer is used exclusively by a copy, and the substance comes with only empty tools. To obtain the stabilizer, the copy must obtain it itself. This happens as follows. You need to insert a needle into a certain place in the spine of the original. Based on the script, this place is strictly between L4 and L5, that is, between 4 and 5 vertebrae of the poetic department. The copy must perform a lumbar puncture, using a needle to pump out the cerebrospinal fluid for exactly 7 days. The clone must insert a stabilizer inside. Exactly once a day for a week. If this is not done, then his body will begin to collapse literally in front of his eyes. Veins will burst teeth, nose, ears, and skin will fall off. Vision will be lost. This will happen a couple of hours after the injection is missed. In a few more hours, the copy will simply dissolve and will be left with a two-necked puddle of bones, blood, and organs. A very important point. Again, according to the movie script, the cerebrospinal fluid can be used strictly from its original. Another person's liquid just won't do. At the same time, the clone can stay awake for more than 7 days, constantly pumping spinal fluid, but its reserves in the original will only be enough for 3 months. After that, the production will stop, and you will need to give the original to lay down to restore the supply of cerebrospinal fluid.
I really need to stabilize my situation.
You need to change.
This may seem strange because AIDS brain fluid in an ordinary person is produced every day, but here everything is explained by the action of the activator. It simply modifies the body of the original, makes it so that the copy sooner or later will inevitably have to swap places with them. And in order to swap places, you need a switch every 7 days. The copies of the original must undergo intravenous transfusions to swap places. After one of them loses consciousness, he needs to connect again intravenous nutrition, which is enough strictly for 7 days. If feeding ends, there will be serious consequences. If the clone misses food, then it will begin to disintegrate until it turns into liquid. There will be no consequences for the original. If the original already misses food, then every day without its support, the body will begin to actively eat due to the body's internal resources. An accelerated aging process will occur. One day of delay to turn a part of the body, for example, a finger into a finger from 90-year-old man, and if you do not feed the original 2 or 3 months, then when you wake up, it will resemble a 100-year-old grandmother. Who is this? At the same time, physically the original will be quite cheerful and extremely durable. It's all about the effect of the activator on his body, which we will talk about now. How do you create a perfect copy of yourself? After the injection of the activator, first occurs a very important process of strengthening the body of the original. The body becomes strong, able to withstand the duplication of all parts of the clones. Inside the body of the original occurs the real duplication of the whole person. From the eye is formed an eye, from the ear, another ear. 3 fingers. A finger is created from the spine. Another spine grows. Principle, I think you understand. Then all this goodness is connected inside the belly of the original without injuring its internal organs, and then the formed copy simply breaks out through the back. It is the activator that allows you to survive such a brutal process of birth of your perfect version. Now let's discuss a very interesting point. Whether the original and the clone have the same consciousness, or whether the clone gets an independent consciousness. You won't believe it, but Russian-speaking and English-speaking forums are still excited about this, whether one or the other version has many supporters. I won't guess, but I'll just use the words of the director of the film, King's Farjit, and the script that puts everything in its place. So the consciousness of the original and the copy is the same. When Elizabeth falls asleep, her consciousness wakes up in her body. And when Sue's consciousness falls asleep, Elizabeth returns to her real body. Here, some who have watched the film may have questions. In the second half of the picture, there are strange moments when Sue pro. And seeing how Elizabeth drool in their family's any greasy food, she got angry and even called create substances to complain.
Or perhaps indulging yourself before the TV.
Elizabeth, in turn, doesn't seem to remember what Yu was doing when she was active, and they talk about each other in the third person. A strange situation for a single consciousness.
She doesn't respect our balance. She's stealing more and more of my time.
The explanation is quite straightforward. Elizabeth lost her mind and developed a split personality.
You absolutely need to pause, stop, and reconsider.
Stop covering. One personality stayed with her, and 2 suck. That's what the film director said. But even without her words, what was written in the script is enough. It says in black and white that when the replica woke up, it was Elizabeth. It's just that in her new body, she even got scared when she saw her old body lying on the floor of the script even at first. Poet. I carry a copy. A. New Elizabeth. For the first weeks, Elizabeth had no problems in the body of the copy. She navigated perfectly. Even when her housekeeper, Maria New Elizabeth, came, she immediately recognized her through the door peephole and did not let her into the apartment. The problem started a little later. Elizabeth, in her old body, was weary of her existence. She wanted the week to end quickly, to find herself in a new body. The woman tormented herself with various thoughts, being in the past a famous person and later becoming unnecessary to anyone. Being has over time turned into a jealous and bitter personality. This had a great impact on her psychological state, as did being fired from her job. It so happened that when she was in her usual body, she began to envy her young body, especially when she saw you on the TV screen or on billboards. Finding a comatose clone in the bathroom only made the situation worse and identified him with another person. In just a month, Elizabeth just goes crazy and acquires a severe form of split personality.
Remember, there is no me or you are one whole.
Buying in turn instead of the original single consciousness receives two-personality Elizabeth and begins to act separately from the original. She stays active longer than usual, causing Elizabeth's real body to age rapidly and her psychological state to become even more distorted.
I am.
Near the end of the film, as Elizabeth attempts to revive the power she has almost fully injected, the copy destroyer comes to life at the same time as the original. This was made possible by Elizabeth's split personality. At the same time, according to the script, such an awakening still had negative consequences for Sue because the consciousness was still single, but bifurcated. She was at first in a state of trance and did not control herself. That is why she beat Elizabeth to death and came to her senses only after her death. At the same time, thanks to the activator, Elizabeth's body was incredibly resistant to physical impact, and Zhu had to beat her for a very long time. As I said, Elizabeth's physiology has changed so that she can create an improved version of herself, a clone, at the same time devoid of biological defects, unlike the original, very strong physical, and can launch an adult 10 metros with one blow. The body of the clone is very hardy and strong, but only as long as it receives a daily dose of stabilizer. Without it, the copy instantly degrades the clone nigh. Under what circumstances should I not introduce an activator? It is intended exclusively for the original. Since the clone is already an ideal copy of the original, the activator simply has nothing to modify, and he begins, on the contrary, to disfigure the creature forming inside the clone, eventually receiving a monster. The life of such a creature is short-lived after a few hours. The body is completely destroyed and decomposes to a state of porridge. These are things, but for today I have everything. I hope you enjoyed everything. If you want more videos like this, write about it in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to my boost, there's a lot of interesting stuff there.